Holy I haven't made a video in a year. Hello there my friends, welcome to my another video after such a long time. Today I wanted to start a new series that I've been thinking about for a very long time, and I decided that finally it is time to bring back some videos. I would like to start making a series where I recreate World of Tanks map in, well, as much detail as I can in a form of a diorama in 1:100 scale. This is because I love how World of Tanks looks. It's visually very stunning, not in gameplay. Fucking hate that game. And I just thought it would be pretty cool to recreate all the maps in a form of diorama and just have them displayed on my desk since I love the game so much. So, welcome to the first installment. I decided to go for something very basic. As you can see in the footage, I am capturing a screenshot for what I'm doing, and as you can tell by the thumbnail, it's a E100 on Himmelsdorf. I think you can't go more basic and OG World of Tanks than this. You probably can, and you will argue with me in the comments, but you know, that's just more comments for me on my video, and therefore YouTube will push it a little more, so please argue with me in the comments. But as you can see, I decided for this position because everyone used to or still plays this position with heavy tanks. It's a good heavy tank position, and we will recreate it as a diorama. The way I decided to approach this is through 3D printing. As you can see here in Blender, I sketched out a simple setup for the diorama. The E100 is modeled fully by me. It was originally for 1:72 scale, and I've already painted that, but I scaled it down for World of Tanks and made it a little more accurate. And then I sculpted basically the entire diorama in Blender in one piece. Now, this is because I wanted to achieve as much accuracy as I could. Of course, it's not 100% accurate, but I tried my best. And if you would like me to show you more of the 3D sculpting process in later videos, please let me know down in the comments. In this video I didn't do it because I thought it would eat up a lot of time from the video, but when it comes to future videos I could totally show you how I am 3D modeling the diorama and even the tank itself. After it was ready, I supported everything in Lychee, I exported it, made it into a print, and threw it into my Saturn for Ultra for 3D printing. After like 80 hours, we ended up with this. A little unassuming pile of parts, but this is all the parts you need for building my models, since I pride myself in making them as simple and detailed as I possibly can. This was all 3D printed, it's in 1:100 scale as I mentioned before, and all the dioramas will be just to keep a simple, you know, unification between all of them. I must say I am pretty proud of the detail. I included all the welds and all the flame cut textures that I could. I did leave out some details that I started noticing as I was working on the model. All the dioramas will be set on this simple piece of styrene. I think this is from AK or Ammo set for dioramas. They package them in 4s, so they're all the same size, and all the dioramas will be this size. I chose 1:100 because on such a small piece of styrene I can still include a lot of the map while not losing that much detail, because I could have gone with 1:144 scale for example, which would allow me to create even more parts of the map, but the detail would get worse. I unsupported the model itself off camera while it was still soft from the printer, but that doesn't mean it still doesn't need some cleanup. There is some residue after the resin supports, so I use my scalpel to remove all the residue, as you would do on a typical plastic model as well, so they don't differ in that at all. After I cleaned everything up, I started gluing some parts into sub-assemblies, namely I glued the entirety of the turret together. However, I didn't glue the tracks and the side skirts because it would be easier to paint the side skirts while they're removable. For gluing, I used black slow dry glue from Ep1. As I mentioned, the diorama was also printed out in a single piece. I didn't print the walls as you could see in the Blender because that was failing, but this plate is good enough. I can place it on top of that styrene. Now in the future I will of course make dioramas a traditional way as well, but in this case I just thought this would be more effective for accuracy. I started base coating all the parts in a black color. This will give me some fake shadows in areas that I might not reach with paint later, and it'll unify all the colors because as you can see the diorama itself was printed in pink resin and the model was gray resin, and I just want everything unified so I don't have any contrast differences that shouldn't be there. After base coating the E100 as well as the diorama, I decided to add some texture underneath the destroyed floor in the diorama because it was kind of empty. I used Vallejo matte for this because it's a pretty nice texture and I just smeared it onto the floor just to give it some bumpiness. I was doing the diorama and the tank at the same time, however for the sake of video continuity I will now only talk about the tank and then we will come back to the diorama. Let's just say we're letting all this mud dry as I paint the tank. I had a hard time deciding on the color scheme of the tank, and in the future I will probably do some voting on camouflages, tanks and dioramas respectively. Here I had to decide myself because I had no one else to decide with me, and I just went for the basic gray because this is the basic camouflage that you get with the tank. I used AK 3rd gen colors for this. These are my favorite acrylic colors for painting models. They're usable for brushes and for airbrushes at the same time, which is pretty perfect. And I started spraying the color on in this cloudy pattern. This is typical German Dunkelgrau, I think the name is, or Panzergrey is also the name of the color, unless they're two different colors, but you know. This is a discussion in modeling world, which one is more accurate, it's just up to you. I used the Dunkelgrau. Spraying it in this cloudy pattern gave the model this nice texture. It looks a little more artistic in a way, and also a little more realistic because colors on things usually aren't just one single color. I decided to enhance this look with some post shading. If you don't know what post shading is, it's a pretty great method to make the vehicle look more 3D and interesting to the eye, especially in such a tiny scale. I can stress this enough. In tiny scales everything looks really dark, so you want your model to have as much contrast as you can get. Post shading is essentially just taking continuously lighter and lighter colors and layering them exactly on those spots where light would shine the most. You can do this in a very smooth way, or you can do it in this cloudy pattern. Pushing the contrast is very important, and at the end of the paint job I was almost using white as the lightest color of the paint job. To enhance the highlights even further, I used a very popular mini painting technique. I took a dry brush, dipped it in some paint, unloaded the paint onto a napkin, which is how I got my last victim, and then I just dry brushed the entire surface until I was satisfied with the picked out detail. To enhance this effect even more, I painted the smallest detail with a thin brush and a very light shade of the base color again. It's essentially the same shade as I used for dry brushing, but since it's painted more precisely than dry brushing, it actually appears more light and more vibrant. This is a very precise work and you really need to be careful because, well, it's gonna be very visible when you have a smear across the entire surface. Ask me how I know. Before you fall asleep, it's time for some washes. I varnish the model with some satin varnish to protect the surface, and I'm using enamel washes for the general surface wash. With the wash being diluted with an enamel thinner, I apply the wash around all the details, creating fake shadows around them and making them look more 3D and visible. I'm using a very dark black wash on the surface because it is a grey vehicle and I want the details to pop as much as possible. This technique of adding wash correlates perfectly with the highlights I've done before, because while the raised areas of the detail are as light as possible, the crevices around them are dark, so it perfectly makes them pop, especially the welts and the flame cut texture. Unfortunately, I have to say my wife left me and took the kids as well, and also there isn't much weathering done on the vehicle as compared to my previous projects, and this is because in-game, when the vehicle is in the city or it's a city map, there isn't mud or dust kicking up on the vehicle. I'm gonna do that in some other dioramas, so what I'm focusing on here is chipping according to the in-game model. I'm using dark grey color as a base chipping color for the first chips. As you can see, I also used it for the tracks as well. When I finish all the chipping on the vehicle in dark grey, I use some rusty brown to chip inside of those grey spots to create a nice 3D effect. I also chip randomly with the brown as well, so there are grey chips, brown chips, and also grey chips with brown chips inside of them to create variety, and this is very similar to how it is in the game. What you might have also noticed in the game is that the vehicles have a very heavy shine, especially on their tracks when they're not dirty, so what I did was use the exact same dry brushing technique as I did before, this time with a silver shiny paint. I dry brushed basically everything with this paint because when you look at the vehicle in-game, there are some pretty shiny areas just on the surface. It's arguable how realistic this is, but this is the beauty of this project and why I'm so excited about it. Even if it's not so realistic, I'm going according to the game, not according to realism. And I always liked this effect and did it on some of my previous models without even having any in-game influence. I must say, for such a tiny model, I'm really pleased with the result and I can't wait to put it in the diorama. Speaking of which, I believe you TikTok brained people can't wait for me to start working on the diorama, so let's start painting that now. I'm gonna skip the entire base coating in grey, because as you can see I just base coated everything in grey, and I'm gonna start painting the wall right away because this is the part I'm the most excited for. I'm gonna use the world's most famous technique that was taught to me by the master himself, Uncle Nightshift, and that is sponging with acrylics. This technique is incredibly simple. Essentially what you do is you take your sponge, dip it in some acrylic color, unload it just a little bit, not too much, and start sponging the color onto the required area. This will create some nice texture, some nice layering, and some nice blending. Just how I blend my pizza in the blender. The wall in game has a very beige, yellowish color. from the screenshots and the gameplay that I remember. There is one itty bitty tiny problem, and that is that there is no changing of light in game, so this area is constantly underneath the shadow of the castle on the hill. So the colors might be a bit badly represented, but that's fine. I choose to use buff, light gray, another shade of light gray, and deck 10 for this shading. And also I think there was some brown. And as you can see, I am sponging it on top of the gray. There is really no rhyme or reason for this technique. I just try layering on more and more and more colors as I go on to create the shade that I want from the reference. It is kind of hard. I had to go back and forth multiple times because I didn't like the results. For enhancing the texture of the surface, I diluted some rubber black and I smudged it over the surface as well. This picked out all the texture that I've created in Blender, and then basically what I was doing was just repeating this, then putting on some light sponging again to pick out the raised details, and then over and over again until I was satisfied with the result. For the sticking out bricks on the top of the building, I used some dark brown again. I painted all of this with a paintbrush. First I just base coated it with one shade of brown. And then I used three different rust shades, light rust, medium rust, and NATO brown, I believe, to pick out each individual brick, or well, in sections, basically randomizing the texture and making them look three-dimensional and real. Again, this was all done with a thin paintbrush. When that was done, I used a white color on a sponge to create the spilled mortar that you can see in the building in the game. I added it on the border between the not destroyed wall and the destroyed brick wall. Then it was just a question of repeating this exact thing on the entirety of the building. With the walls of the building being completely painted, I could move on to painting the rubble around it. Now I was very scared of this part because I didn't know how to approach it. Of course, there's a lot of detail in game and I didn't really have the time to paint each and every pebble in a different color. So what I did first was I base coated it with the same brown I used for the bricks. Then I went over it with a black wash, just like I did over the wall, and then I started putting on some diluted dusty colors and also some diluted gray colors over the entire rubble, letting it all sort of wet blend together, and I just wanted to see where that went. While that was drying, I painted the windowsills with brown to represent wood. The floor was also painted brown, and these signs on the outside were painted with black. After all, I did decide to pick out some of the larger chunks with different colors, so I used some browns, some rusty colors, some blacks, some whatever else I had on my hand, and I painted all the little details. This was an incredibly long process, which I then followed with some dry brushing just to pick out all the details again. Again, I was doing a lot of back and forth with this, adding more washes, adding more paint, adding more dry brush, and then some dark wash again, and then some light wash, and then some dry brush, and I was just doing this over and over again until I was happy with the result. After a blue layer over the black layer, I then painted the sides of the sign with white, because you can see this in game. There is also some writing on it, the name of the street, but in such a small scale I didn't dare to try writing it with a brush, and I couldn't make my own decals, so simple outline like this will do. The street was basically the same story as the rubble and as the wall. I painted it according to the game. In game you can notice that the pathway is a little more beige, some of the different bricks are a little more gray, stuff like that, so I tried replicating that as well as I could. And then another light gray dry brush just for good measure. Then it was time for some very simple finishing touches, dry brushes, washes, until I was happy with the result. I dry fitted the model to the diorama to paint on some track marks, and I can hear you unicorn screaming, "Oh my god, why isn't he side scraping in that position? Is he a bot?" But too bad for you, I already painted myself as the Chad and you as the crying Wojak, and it's just a diorama, so come on. Also yes, I am a bot. Last thing that was needed to do was to prepare the base for the diorama. In the future I would love to put some proper sides on my dioramas, but right now I couldn't, so what I did was basically just paint the sides with black, which is good enough. The main part is the tank and the building itself. Anyway. When it was all assembled, I used a ceramic, very shiny super gloss varnish to create the puddles that you can see in the in-game basically, and once those dried the model was done and we can go to the good old spinny bit. So finally, after a year, I can say that a new project is finally done. Now, I would be lying if I said that I haven't made models in that time, but for some reason there just wasn't time or inspiration to do any new videos, and I really apologize about that if any of you missed me, which I highly doubt. I mean, come on, right? Anyway, this new project I've been thinking about for a very long time. I had this idea of World of Tanks dioramas ever since I got the first 3D printer and I started 3D modeling, and now finally the first one is here. And I already have plans for the next one. I think first 3 dioramas I will decide on them on my own, because I wanna see how they do, and later down the line, once there is enough people watching these videos, I would love to get you, the audience, included in these videos and see what you would like me to create as a diorama. So for example, we will do some community polls, suggestions and stuff like that, which diorama, which map should be the next and which tank should be next. I was thinking that I would only do tier 10s, but obviously not all maps are on tier 10, there are some maps that are on lower tiers, so we'll see what gets popular. I don't really want to do basic vehicles, unless they are like legendary, obviously, so you know, we'll see where the project goes. Anyway, I really hope that you enjoyed this. Again, thank you so much for staying with me over the year that I haven't been posting, and I really hope that you will stay here with me for the next round of dioramas, which will come hopefully very soon and not in a year. So thank you again for watching. Leave a comment with some suggestions if you would like, share these videos with your friends, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.